Again, my name is Ricardo Nuñez. I'm the Director of Economic Democracy, and today we are here to talk about how to become a lawyer without going to law school. We are broadcasting from Oakland, California. It's beautiful today from the offices of the Sustainable Economies Law Center, where Yassi, Tia, and myself all work. So I just wanted to give a little quick intro to the Law Center itself. So at the Sustainable Economies Law Center, we provide education, research, advice, and advocacy for just, resilient local economies. And when I when I heard about the organization and started talking to a few of the folks who worked here, and was hearing about the work that they do, I sort of like started to think about, wait, what do lawyers do? You know, sometimes people think that all lawyers do is litigate. You know, they go to court and they are advocating in front of a judge for their client or for some issue. Other people think that a lot of attorneys become politicians and make laws. But actually, there's a whole slew of attorneys who are actually transactional law attorneys. They're people whose sole purpose is to help manage risk for companies and organizations, to help them navigate tax law, to create the agreements and the records for transactions between the business. And what we found is that actually so much of this field of transactional law attorneys is greasing a set of wheels that is destroying our communities and ecology. And so our idea at the Sustainable Economies Law Center is to create a whole new field of transactional law attorneys, greasing a new set of wheels around worker-owned cooperatives, grocery store cooperatives, time banks, land trust, urban agriculture, all of these things that are building a just and resilient local economy. And so at the Law Center, we envision a more just and resilient economic legal system. We identify and advocate for public policies to create this new system. We empower community-based entrepreneurs and innovators to create replicable legal structures. We educate communities like we're doing today about the potential of new economic strategies and train the next generation of community-based lawyers to meet the legal needs of resilient communities everywhere. So that's how we do our work and what we try to do. And so today's teach-in is really about spreading that vision, educating communities, and training you all who are interested in either becoming a legal apprentice or maybe mentoring an apprentice, or you're in the apprenticeship program itself and looking to get some more information. So I just want to note before we move on that the law office study program that we're talking about today, particularly the one in California, is not a program of the Law Center. We just like to promote it as a model. We believe that many times people who are interested in social, racial, economic justice going into law school come out with so much debt that they're unable to actually perform the activities and provide the services to our communities that they need to transform and build self-determination because of the debt that they have. And so what we advocate is for different pathways to become attorneys, pathways that empower the individual attorneys themselves and the communities that they're going to be working with. So even though this is not a law center program, we do not take on legal apprentices, we do not train them from the outside of our organization's staff members, we do have plenty of resources. So thank you, Yassi. So we have lots of bar review course books that once people who take the bar and pass, they don't need that stuff anymore, so they'll either throw it into the recycle bin, or a lot of times people who know that we're promoting the apprenticeship program will give us their books. And just to show you one, here is one of the books. So this costs a lot of money when you want to participate in, for example, Barbari's education to pass the bar. And so we have these books free to lend out to folks. So if you are in the Bay Area in California and you are studying, you want to start studying as an apprentice, we have plenty of these books to loan out to you. So that's a little bit about the Law Center, and I'll pass it over, or actually, before I pass it over to Yassi, what is a legal apprenticeship? So let me just put down the book. So what is practicing law? What does that mean? What is a legal apprenticeship? So in this photo here, this is the bar exam. In every state, to become a licensed attorney, to practice law, to provide legal services, you have to pass a bar exam. And so you have to go in this really cramped, dead space. It's with all the nerves of thousands of other people to take a test. And so the question for us is, what states allow you to be eligible to take the bar exam without going to law school? And we at the Law Center are excited that California is one of those states. And so these 4 folks who have arrows pointing at them are either apprentices or become attorneys through the apprenticeship program. And so where is a legal apprenticeship possible? So there are currently 4 states that you do not have to go to any law school at all to become an attorney. And those states are Virginia, the state of Washington, Bernie's state of Vermont, and California. So those are the 4 states that you don't have to go to any law school, that provide an articulated path to becoming an attorney just through reading the law, or the law study program in California, or legal apprenticeship. So where are there some other states where legal apprenticeship, partial legal apprenticeship is possible? And by partial, I mean you're going to have to go to some law school, maybe ABA law school, and then do the rest of your legal training as a legal apprentice. So those states are Maine, so that's the lobster there, New York City, or sorry, not New York City, New York State. What was it? West Virginia and Wyoming. So those are 4 states where you can do the legal apprenticeship, but you have to go to some law school. So that's the sort of overview of what the legal apprenticeship is and where it's available. And for the rest of the time, we're really going to be going deeper into the regulations in California and talking from the perspective of the law study program in California. I'll pass it over to Yassi.
Yeah, thanks. So Ricardo and I both are doing / did the California program. And so that's where we have our expertise and can answer questions about that. So if anyone's joining from out of state, we won't have too much extra information to give to you right now, but there are other resources that we can point you to, including our blog, likelincoln.org. So in California, the program requires a total of 4 years of study. That's at minimum, so it could actually take quite a bit longer, depending on a few factors, including whether you submit your semi-annual reports on time and correctly, whether you pass the first year law students exam on time, and of course, whether or not you pass the bar exam on your first try. So that all of those factors and more can lead to you actually having a longer course of study. But 4 years is the minimum. As you might know, full-time law school is 3 years. But we like to say that applying to law schools, taking the LSATs and all of that, basically takes another year. So there potentially is equivalency there. So one of the major hurdles is the first year law students exam. That's the only major exam that you're responsible for before taking the bar exam. So that you're eligible to take the first year law students exam after you've completed your first year of law study. Once you're eligible, you have 3 administrations in which to actually take the exam and pass it. That means that once you become eligible and the next possible exam, you might decide, I'm not ready yet, I don't want to spend that money, I don't have time to study for it. You can elect to just skip that exam administration and elect to take it the next year or which I think it happens every 6 months. Mm-hmm. So that's actually what I did. I decided wow, I really am not ready for this, so I'm just going to try it on the second administration. I passed it, and so I got my full first year credit and more. The issue is that if you either, if you don't pass it within 3 administrations, you actually start to lose time. That means that all of the time past your first year that you've been trying to pass the exam just starts to disappear. So that could really be a barrier. And if that wasn't clear, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. You're also required to take monthly exams. These are administered by your supervising attorney. They can really be about anything. Ours really took like a wide range of shapes and sizes. Basically, sometimes we had practice multiple choice exams, which are called the MBEs, the multi-state bar exam, multiple choice questions that are from past examinations. I found those to be really helpful, and they really do prepare you well for the bar exam. We also had essays that we had to write that came from past bar exams, and my supervising attorney and Ricardo's, we shared the same supervising attorney for some period of time, got a little bit creative and sometimes asked us to do essays about topics that were related to the law center's work. And if you and your supervising attorney decide that it would be useful to do a memo on some legal question, then you could do that. And it could be helpful for both you and your supervising attorney. So really make it useful, make it work for you and your supervising attorney. The other requirement is to submit your monthly exams every 6 months in a semi-annual report that includes a fee. I think it's like $150 something dollars right now. $158. But that changes, so make sure you stay on top of that. It includes the exams that you took every month, the hours that you studied, and also a very specific detailed list of what materials you studied and for how long. So lastly, I wanted to mention that you have the opportunity to switch your supervising attorney every 6 months. I never did that, but in theory, it was a great idea because that allows you to actually experience a broad range of areas of practice. So for example, if you're not really sure what field you want to practice in, that's your chance to actually experience housing law, trust and estates, and other things like that. So I would encourage folks to do that if you have the capacity or interest.
Just before we move on, I am seeing a bunch of chats. Okay, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box because our friend and coworker Tia is going to be collecting those, and then we'll have a Q&A portion at the end of our talk after we give all the information. So please use the Q&A and not the chat box because we won't be looking at that. Sweet.
Cool. Okay, so there's quite a few benefits to doing legal apprenticeship. The first is cost savings. No, whatever. Yeah, it's fine. Basically, if you go to law school, it could run in the 6 figures, and it's debilitating amounts of debt for many of us. So that's a huge benefit for us, and it was a big factor for me. And
and also I had a family member who thought that he wanted to become an attorney and went to law school, and after about a year and a half decided it wasn't for him, and he had all this debt to pay off. And actually I think it was last year, about 8 years after he decided to leave law school, is when he finally finished paying off his debt. So, and he's not an attorney. So this provides a benefit for people who are interested in becoming attorneys, not to have to go into debt just to learn that they don't want to do this type of work for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, great point. So the cost is a huge factor for a lot of us, and that's actually what makes the legal apprenticeship a great route for folks who otherwise wouldn't go to law school, couldn't afford it, don't have a law school near where they have to live, etc. So flexible schedule is another benefit. You're supposed to be studying 18 hours a week in regular business hours. So there's that, but also you have the ability to hold a job. In addition to that, you have the ability to study on the weekends in addition to that. So you don't have to go to courses. It's not as rigid as going to law school can be. Okay. The other benefit is hands-on learning. You have the ability to be in a law office, learn from real-life attorneys, and see what it's like day to day to do the work that you think you're going to want to do once you pass the bar exam. And I found that to be really valuable myself. It's also an alternative to traditional school. I have taken a series of alternative paths in my education, and I found this to be a really attractive opportunity because I got to work at the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which for me is really a dream job, and has such a meaningful mission that it was the perfect scenario for me to be able to do this work full time, get paid, work with incredible people and do good work, and also be working towards a long-term goal with my higher education through this apprenticeship. Again, just you get to skip the LSATs. You don't have to do the law school applications, and you also are working in the field for 4 years or more, and through that, you're making really valuable contacts and connections with people you might work with for a long time who might offer you a job once you actually get your law license. So it's really valuable in that sense.
If I could just add, when what was it that a lot of times at the law center, many law school graduates, even after they pass the bar, they'll come and volunteer with us because they literally don't know how to serve their clients. So this provides a lot of that hands-on mentoring and development.
Yeah, law schools don't always provide students with the practical engagement side, and it's a lot of theory, which I'm not super fan of. So yeah, and the other bit that we've actually noticed is that people tend to move to a different community to go to school, and you start to make connections with your peers, with professors, with places you intern at, and you might meet people and start a family or whatever that is. You might end up actually living where you went to school or near there. For us, we're seeing legal apprenticeship as an opportunity to actually stay in the community that you want to ultimately serve. So there are some challenges. We've heard that it's really difficult to find a supervisor. For Ricardo and I, that wasn't the case, and we'll get into that later, but that's definitely a challenge that needs to be addressed. The program lasts a very long time, which requires really a lot of a lot of strength and discipline and ability to create your own coursework and stick to it. Granted, you will deviate from that course at some point, but you can come back to it, and I'll talk more about the importance of cramming for the legal apprenticeship in a little bit. It's also kind of a lonely track, depending on whether or not you can find other apprentices nearby to work with and study with, and just at the very least commiserate with. You don't have a peer group just by default. You have to find it for yourself. It can be really harsh in terms of losing time. I think all of us at the Law Center may have experienced a loss of time, varying in duration, but you really have to stay on top of it with the bar rules. There's confusing rules, which makes it difficult to comply with, and there's also really not very much support from the bar itself. Perhaps that's going to change. Hopefully it will. Legal apprenticeship is becoming more widely recognized.
Why is that? Yassi?
Thanks in no small part to Kim Kardashian now trying to be like us.
You're welcome, Kim.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. No recognition for bar exam reciprocity outside the US or outside of California essentially means that when you go to law school and that's recognized as a way to actually be eligible to sit for the bar in other states. But if you do a legal apprenticeship, that's not the case. So there's that. For us, it doesn't matter as much because we plan to either live in California forever or if we do end up moving, you have the opportunity to actually have clients that you serve who are California residents, even if you're remote. So you could start advising people over, webinar, etc.
And if you want to work in another state, you can have you can work underneath an attorney that's licensed in that state. But that is also an additional barrier that you'd have to work through, because you'd have to convince somebody that, they're going to take on the liability if you mismanage or provide incompetent legal advice to somebody in that different state.
Yep. And the last bullet point is just about, it's still not really a well-known route to becoming an attorney, and some people might be skeptical because of that. And but that's not always the case. As Ricardo mentioned, a lot of people who do go to law school don't have the amount of practical experience that we have going into it. So there's that. And now we'll talk about our personal experiences with this, because really the program is so open-ended that it could be different for people depending on their life circumstances, etc. So we just want to share a little bit about why we personally decided to go through the legal apprenticeship and what we hope to do with the law license. So maybe you can kick it off with answering that.
Yeah, why I did the legal apprenticeship?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So when I was previously a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia for 2.5 years, and when I finished that, I came back to the States. And actually in Zambia was where I was introduced to cooperatives, the idea of cooperatives, and saw the transformative impacts that they had on communities there. And so when I came back, I was looking for a group of folks who were wanting to support the growth of a cooperative economy in LA. And we didn't have any worker co-ops at the time down there. So I came up to the Bay Area and I was interviewing worker owners. I was interviewing technical assistance providers. And I interviewed a woman, Janelle Orsi, who had written a book called Practicing Law in the Sharing Economy, all about serving cooperatives, urban farms, all those types of enterprises. And I was talking about how I wanted to be the most effective and useful resource for building a non-extractive cooperative economy. And she mentioned that the legal apprenticeship was a route, and that these worker co-ops and building this new economy is going to take legal expertise that doesn't exist yet. And so for me, the reason that I joined the law center and started off on this path to become a legal apprentice is that I saw it could be a tool of transformation that I could provide my community that didn't exist. So that's really why I jumped into this, was because I wanted to be the most useful for our movements as possible. And this is where, and this is how I think I can do it. So yeah, so Yassi, why did you do the legal apprenticeship?
I was thinking about that while you're talking. I think I did the legal apprenticeship for a variety of reasons. I, like I mentioned before, wanted to continue working at the law center. Back in 2012, I started working here, and my plan was not to stay here and just work full-time for many years. My plan was just to go to higher education and pursue environmental policy or urban planning, something in that field. And Janelle, the same person, who's the executive director of the law center, basically said, well, don't do that, stay here, become a legal apprentice. And, it sort of struck me as, a crazy idea, because I was so intent on going through, a more traditional program. But sort of overnight, actually, exactly, literally overnight, I created a list of pros and cons of going to, a higher education program or doing the apprenticeship. And I really came up with very few reasons to do the route that I was so intent on doing. So I decided the next day to do it. And I began my apprenticeship in 2013 and wrapped it up in 2017 with the bar exam. And You know, actually, when people ask me if they're interested in legal apprenticeship and they ask me about it and why I did it, I make sure that I ask them why they want to be an attorney, because it's such a intense program and such a heavy lift that you really need to know why it is you're doing it, because that will keep you inspired and focused on the goal. For me, I think I see it as a way to serve the communities that I'm serving now, but in a different way. For me, I'm focused on policy, so having a legal background is useful but not necessary. But I do want to deepen my practice with clients, and I've been engaging with clients through our legal cafes and also taking on clients one-on-one for the law center. And it's been really exciting, and it's a really powerful and wonderful way to serve people by helping them navigate legal challenges that could destroy projects that otherwise are really serving our communities. So I see it as a way to just be in the background and support good people doing good work.
And can you tell us how you found your mentor and what that experience was like working under your supervising attorney?
Yeah, well, as I said, I've found Janelle Orsi, the attorney who was my supervising attorney, because I was working at the law center. But my experience with Janelle was, well, very early on, she was very hands-on and was really creative and supportive in like helping us with study sessions and making exams. And but of course, it's a really long program, and we're all busy. And so our course of work together ultimately became more oriented towards other apprentices. So the apprentices, there ended up being 4 of us at the same time apprenticing at the law center. We really leaned on each other for peer support and questions and that kind of thing. But you know, Janelle was administering my exams throughout the years and actually advocated for me with the bar when things got sort of confusing, and you know, we had to navigate some barriers around the rules there. So I found her support to be really helpful. But I do want to highlight that it's really different for every apprentice and apprentice and mentor combo, and you can really take it in any direction you want. For me, I was working at the law center, therefore I had my salary through the law center, which helped me to live in the Bay Area while I was doing this apprenticeship. I couldn't have done it otherwise. And yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I also was, Janelle was my supervising attorney for a while. And like Yassi mentioned, she was very hands-on at the beginning. And then as it evolved, we started leaning on each other as apprentices. But at a certain point, it was interesting because even though our law center is a democratically run nonprofit, it's trying to break down hierarchies and that type of thing. The fact that I was apprenticing with someone who I saw as a mentor, not only in the legal apprenticeship context, but also in my work context. And so both feeling obligated to them both around like work and sort of all of the work product that I'm doing, or maybe late on, and then the legal apprentice stuff that I'm doing and maybe late on, just felt a lot for me at times. And so I decided to switch to another attorney at the law center who I actually don't overlap in with a lot of work, which allowed me to sort of have a little breathing room to feel like the relationship was more comfortable for me, because I wasn't that person. The other attorney, Neil Thapar, was not relying on me to do work with them, so that we could really focus on my studies. So that's been sort of my experience, and it's been easy because we're at the law center and we are committed to developing new pathways to become attorneys. And so we have a few attorneys on staff who are eligible to supervise apprentices. So that, yeah, was my experience. So the study part. How did you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, Ricardo started alluding to the study part because that's the stuff you have to do and manage to balance with everything else going on in your life. In our case, we're mostly talking about our obligations to the Law Center and our jobs here. So for me, it was really essential to trial and error, but eventually to set aside a very clear time where I would just focus 100% of my attention on the apprenticeship, because it's really easy to check your email, and it's satisfying to send out emails instead of reading a very big book that's really intimidating and is, a very long process. So I found it really essential to just be diligent about creating space for apprenticeship study, particularly as it got closer and closer to exam times. For exams, I ended up using a bar prep program, which I highly recommend to anyone who's doing the legal apprenticeship. All law students, or most law students, sorry about the noise. Most law students actually do take bar prep courses even after they've gone to law school to help them get in shape for the bar exam itself. The same goes for apprentices. You can use the same programs. And I actually worked, I signed up for a bar prep program early on. So I actually used the materials for the first year law students exam, which covered criminal law, contract law, and torts. And then I used it again for the bar prep, which I found to be extremely important. Again, you can find other materials online or from former law students and whatnot. So there's a lot of options there, but I highly recommend using materials that are put together in a study plan. And in terms of studying for the baby bar itself, I would highly recommend that you focus a lot on practice questions like MBEs that I mentioned before, multi-state bar exam questions. Those are the multiple choice questions. They're very unique questions, and you start just by practicing them, you'll get a sense for what they're asking and how to approach them. So you get faster and faster and can actually keep up with the pace on the exam. And the same goes for essays. The bar exam and baby bar essay questions are very specifically structured, and your answer has to be very specifically structured as well. So you'll start to get a sense for what works and what doesn't by reading model answers as well from past exams. So I would recommend that. And then, I am a strong advocate for crunch time. You have to cram for these exams. You can't just learn it all. And no matter how smart you are, you really should expect that you need to take, at least a couple weeks to study for the bar exam right before it. So just being able to account for that in your life is really important. Yeah. Do you have any study questions or study tips?
Yeah, I think, so this has been one of the challenges for myself, is that I'm actually, from being part of this program, and I'll be short because we have a bunch of questions and we want to leave time for some Q&A. But one of the challenges for me is that I really have found that I like structured environment. I like community, to be part of a community of learners, to have somebody who has a depth of knowledge in that area to talk through and help me understand things. If you're someone who can pick up a book and read the information and sort of in an autodidactic way learn content, this is a great program for you. But for me, I'm somebody who learns through conversation. And so that has been one of the challenges for me, and part of the reason why I'm not an attorney yet. I'm going to be eligible to take the bar next year, and partially because of what Yassi was mentioning earlier around you have to pass within 3 administrations, the first year law students exam once you become eligible, and you can keep taking it, but when you do pass after that 3rd administration, you only get 1 year counted towards your 4 years of law study. And so for me, I passed after and essentially had about 3 years taken off of the time. So that's why I'll become eligible next year, even though I've been studying and reading the law for about 6 years now. So I think part of the big takeaway from that is just like understand your own learning style and then try to create that for yourself. And so what I'm hoping to do moving forward is we'll get into what resources exist, but one of them is a Facebook group. And so creating some events for those in the Bay Area who just want to come together and study, and really, like, it's not about teaching each other. We can have conversations, but it's really just about peer accountability and just showing up to a space that, just a group of other folks are going to be studying just like you, this same areas of law. So yeah, that's my high level takeaway for study tips. Yeah.
Great. Well, shall we move on to Q&A?
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, we're going to do some Q&A, just some coffee talk. So Tia is going to help us out. I see that there's a lot of questions in the question box. You can see those questions.
I can see the questions and I'll read them to you.
Okay.
Okay. The first question is basically, how do law school classes affect the length requirement of an apprenticeship? So this person has roughly 2 years of law school completed.
I think from my understanding, and this you'll have to check with the bar, the California State Bar, and there's contacts that are publicly available on their website. But what my understanding is that the apprenticeship, if you do if you participate in the legal apprenticeship at all, it's you have to have 4 years total. So if you do 2 years in law school, then if you become a legal apprentice, you have to do 2 more years before you're eligible to take the bar. So, but that's I'm not an expert in this area of law, and a lot of the regulations aren't actually written in the statutory code. They're made by the staff at the bar. So you'll have to double check with them. I don't know if you have a different understanding.
Yeah, I would just check, like Ricardo said, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, can you study part-time or does it have to be full-time?
So again, my understanding is that it has to be 18 hours per week of study in a law office, and 5 of those hours have to be under the direct supervision of your supervising attorney. And so that's my understanding, is that you can't do it part-time. I believe you have to do it the full 18 hours per week for all 4 years, so the time that you're continuously studying, reading the law.
Right. They say that it has to be a minimum of 48 weeks per year. So that comes out to potentially having 4 weeks of not being in the law office or judge's chambers with your supervising attorney. But otherwise, there's no option for part-time, unfortunately.
Thank you. The next question is, what areas of law do most apprentices end up working in?
You want to start off?
I don't know. But I guess we have anecdotal. We just know a few apprentices in the Bay Area who've been working in civil rights. And who else do you remember?
So yeah, anecdotally, another organization that promotes the Law for Study program is the United Farm Workers. And so what they do is they, in their own community of farm workers, they reach out and let folks know that they can become an attorney this way. And they have a whole program at their organization to facilitate it. And so they are doing farmer justice. So so that's I've seen some other former apprentices who are now attorneys doing litigation, like that kind of, have you been hit by a car, kind of thing. And so really you can do any type of area of law that you're interested in. But those are just anecdotal, what we have heard about. So, and just a reminder, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A box and not in the chat. So, yeah.
Okay. Next one is, where would you recommend to look for an apprenticeship program? I think they mean placement.
Sorry, say that one more time.
It's similar to many other questions. I'll rephrase it. It's, how can I find a law firm that will accept new apprentices?
Yeah, so what we tend to recommend for people is, and also the slide that you're seeing is not accurate. Sorry. We're not going to unmute you. Apparently we're not able to do that. So again, just put your questions in the Q&A.
Sorry about that.
So what we recommend to people is to think about what areas of law you're interested in maybe practicing, and then going to attorneys, looking them up, going to attorneys in those fields and asking if you can take them out to coffee, and be really prepared to be able to answer all their questions about legal apprenticeship. So understand the rules, be prepared to, mention what the benefits are to their practice potentially, be prepared to explain to them how you'll be able to, do most of the heavy lifting and make it as easy as possible for them. And, you can do a lot of that preparation by reading our materials online and maybe even talking to other apprentices who have done the same thing. We have a Facebook group that a ton of apprentices are using to learn from each other and connect. So we'll get into that on the last slide with our resources. But that would be what I would recommend. And if you're lucky enough to actually know an attorney, that would be a great place to start. And then you can ask them if they have any recommendations for attorneys and go from there.
Yeah, a few of the folks that I know of, one is the National Lawyers Guild. So they're a left-leaning national organization of attorneys promoting social justice. And there's attorneys in that network that are interested in supervising apprentices. So that's an organization to connect with. Also, yeah, like Yassi said, if you know an attorney, a lot of the apprentices that I've met, like at the baby bar, or who have come to some of our events, and sorry for the background, I think they're doing some construction in our office. Some of the other apprentices that I've met, it's like they're apprenticing under their cousin or under their dad or mom or something like that. And one of our other coworkers, Chris Tittle, who is an attorney, he had, I think, at least 3, if not 4, supervising attorneys through his apprenticeship career. And he found them through our network of volunteers. And most of the people that he worked with were just small, independent practices of one attorney doing wills and trust or estate planning. So trying to connect with networks of attorneys is probably another great avenue to try to connect with potential supervising attorneys. So, yeah.
Great. We have 20 more questions.
Okay, sweet. Yeah.
Okay.
We have 15 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The next one is, does the lack of reciprocity apply to the other 3 states that allow legal apprenticeships?
Good question.
So, so each state is different. It's governed by their own laws. And when we're talking about reciprocity regarding the legal apprenticeship, we're just talking about those who have done the legal apprenticeship in California who become eligible to take the bar in California. So they're not eligible, like if you go to UCLA Law School and you get a JD, then because it's a ABA approved school, you can sit for the bar in many other states, but not through the legal apprenticeship program. Once you become an attorney, though, there's a lot of states that allow you to sit for their bar if you are a licensed attorney practicing in good whatever the phrase
standing.
Is. Yes, thank you. In good standing. And some states say you have to be in good standing for 5 years practicing in your original licensed state to sit for their bar and those types of things. So, so that's one thing to consider as well, is that some states' regulations are for those, say that you can sit for their bar if you're licensed in another state. The reciprocity as well, even if you went to an ABA approved, American Bar Association approved law school, got your JD, then became an attorney in California, California has no reciprocity with any other state. So Some states, when you become an attorney in that state, you can practice in 2, 3, 4 other states. But California doesn't have any reciprocity with any other state. So even if you did become an attorney going the traditional route through law school, you would still have to find the regulations around practicing in other states and sit for their bar, or see if you needed to go to some number of hours of law school or credits or something like that. So, and we can share, we have there's a comprehensive guide of all the regulations nationally for each state around becoming attorneys within each state. So we can share that resource with you after this as well. Do you have anything else to?
No.
Okay.
All right. One question is, can any attorney be a supervisor? What are the expectations or obligations on supervising attorneys?
Yeah. So in California, the attorneys are qualified to take on up to 2 apprentices at a time if they have practiced consistently for 5 or more years. Mm-hmm. So no breaks in their practice. So they have to have been registered with the bar throughout that entire time. Those are the main requirements, mm-hmm. and I don't think there's anything else.
Was there a second part to that question? It was, what are the requirements?
No, just okay. What are their obligations?
Oh, their obligations.
Oh, their obligations. Yeah. So they have to supervise you. You'll be in their workplace 18 hours a week or more, directly under their supervision for 5 of those hours. And what we've interpreted that to mean is, like, if they're going to a client meeting, you're sitting there with them, observing, potentially contributing. You can be looking over the shoulder when they're writing a legal memo or whatever it is. Just being there even to answer your questions. So you could be sitting there studying, taking an exam, and look over your shoulder and ask them, like, what does this mean? And so basically the purpose of this 5-hour minimum direct supervision is to make sure that you are actually learning from the professional that you are apprenticing under. And they have to sign your 6-month reports, administer your monthly examination, and grade it. That's very important. Mm-hmm. What else?
I think that's all the regulations we'll share with you after, but I think those are like the big ones, is just making that paperwork that you fill out every 6 months. It's just a 1-page front and back that you're writing out what you studied and how many hours, and the attorney has to sign the document under penalty of perjury, so to verify. And so they're on the hook if the bar, the California bar, wants to dispute your reports. So yeah.
Okay. Another question is, do you know any examples where apprentices have been able to practice internationally?
Yeah. No, I mean, no, I don't know any. I know that some attorneys, depending on the type of law that you want to do, sometimes you don't have to physically be in California. Like Yassi was saying earlier, you can maybe, if you're going to be visiting or moving to another state, or part-time living in another state, you can still have clients in California if you're licensed in California. And I met an attorney in the past who did a lot of transactional law, so the law that we do at the law center, where a lot of it is like filling out paperwork, sending it to the California Secretary of State, talking with their client over the phone about setting up their legal entity or navigating taxes or something like this. And this attorney, for 3 to 5 months a year, was living, I think, in Southeast Asia, and doing the work from there. So if that's what the questioner is getting at, whether or not you can maybe live internationally, or you can, but I don't know if that was the intent. So sorry if that wasn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm not sure how other countries would view this. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And what is the name of the bar prep program you mentioned? That worked out for you?
Do we want to promote it on our webinar?
You said it was, you loved it, so go for it, and then I can share my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the materials. I liked the way that they were.
What's it called?
yeah, I'm getting to it. Disclaimer first is that I thought it was really good for my study style. Like Ricardo said, it's important to know how you learn. And the program is called one-timers, meaning you take the bar once, so one-timers. It had video lectures, audio lectures, practice MBEs, practice essays, and model answers for the essays. And then it had all of the actual legal materials in an outline form. So I found it to be really useful. I also thought it was really nice that the person who runs the program actually allowed me to pay for half of the program to study for the baby bar. And then if I liked it, I could re-up and pay the other half for the full program access for bar exam prep. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's a lot like the larger programs like Kaplan and Barbary, because they're so massive entities. They won't be that flexible. They won't give you certain access just for baby bar materials. They won't give you access if you pay for the full program to have access to all those resources over 4 years while you're studying or being a legal apprentice. So that's the benefit of some of these smaller bar prep courses, is that they can be more flexible, like one-timers. So, but I know just anecdotally from our other coworkers, two of our other coworkers who became attorneys without going to law school didn't pay for any program. They just used the free books that other past bar examine students had taken and were done with. And so, yeah, that's so you don't need to pay for anything if you feel like just reading a book is good enough for you. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Next question is, when working with a supervising attorney, is it possible to be paid for work performed that also counts towards study hours?
You want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. Like we mentioned before, your partnership with your supervising attorney can take a lot of different forms, including you getting paid for your work, you paying them for supervising you. No, you can't do that.
No.
False. You can't do
False.
that. That was a trick question. So you can't do that. But you can work for another organization. You can work for that organization that they work at. In our case, it's a nonprofit law center. So we're working for a nonprofit with many, many attorneys here. So yeah, you can structure it in different ways.
Yeah, I think we might have time for 2 questions, but yeah, just to re-emphasize, you can be paid for the work that you're doing, and that time, as long as it's legal work and it is part of learning the practice of law. So you can be paid for that time and work performed. It is illegal under the current code to pay your supervising attorney. So supervising attorneys cannot be financially compensated in any way for their supervision of an apprentice.
And we're not sure if that's the case in all of the states that have apprenticeship programs, but apparently that's the case in California, so don't do that.
How about this? Is study exclusively reading? This person learns more from conversation than reading.
I think, yeah, it's not really clearly defined. You'll find that as you learn the law, words, what do they mean? So an interpretation is really about how well you can base your argument and if there's any past precedent. So for us, or for myself personally, study was definitely reading. So reading like examples and explanations, which is a great book series, reading the one-timers materials, but also at the Law Center, a lot of the work that we do is public education and training around legal concepts and how nonprofits and cooperatives can navigate the law. And so part of my study personally was actually learning the content and then presenting it, and yeah, being in conversation with other legal professionals around how to navigate the law. So that's my interpretation of it, that it can include that.
Another question is, are there any lawyers at the Law Center who are able to take on apprentices?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. There are attorneys who are legally eligible to take on legal apprentices, but I do not want to say that they are right now looking to take on any legal apprentices. I do not want to set the expectation, like I said at the top of this webinar. This is not a program that the Law Center is putting on ourselves. This is a California Bar program, and we are just promoting it. But we definitely have a lot of public events. So if you come to our public events, you might be able to convince one of the attorneys here at the Law Center to be your supervising attorney. But I don't want to set that expectation that it's a sure thing.
Yeah. Reach out to me in 5 years.
Yeah.
4 years.
4 years. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you think you have one?
Yeah, one more.
Time for one more?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What does your curriculum look like throughout the 4 years?
Well, there's 12 to 14 topics on the bar, depending on how you count them. And my curriculum, I've really focused on the big ones first. I prioritize contracts, criminal law, and torts for the first year or more, because again, that's on the first year law students examination. After you pass the first year law students exam, you have about 3 years left to prepare yourself for the bar exam. Over that period of time, I started getting more into the other topics. Not that I hadn't touched on them prior to the first year law students exam, but I really tried to focus on what mattered for the baby bar. You'll get a sense of what topics are heavily tested on the bar, and those should be the ones that you prioritize and really work really hard on, because they are much more in-depth, much more complicated, and they show up more frequently on the exam. That's what I did. And then once you start getting really close to the bar exam, you can start layering on all of the California-based laws and all of the other sort of minor topics. I thought that that worked for me. Again, I didn't, over my 3 years, get through every topic. A lot of it happened in the time where I was cramming right before the exam.
Yeah. And that just also brings up one last thing that we forgot to mention, was when you start your legal apprenticeship, you actually start your legal apprenticeship and then you submit the first paperwork, the initial paperwork, to the California Bar to say, I started, and you have to submit it within 30 days of starting. But you can't submit it and say, I'm going to start next month. You have to start and then submit the paperwork and say, I started 30 days ago or within the last 30 days. And part of that initial paperwork that you send to the California Bar is your first year curriculum. And so we have on our website, we're going to get into some resources, like Lincoln.org, we have templates for your first year curriculum. And then, like I said, these like Barbary books, they have it all sketched out, how to study and the order to do it. Also, on the California Bar website, they have past exams and past responses. And they also actually, for almost all the subjects, they have outlines of what they are going to test on for the bar. So you can use that as your like highest level outline of what you should study, and go from there. So just to let you know, if you want some more practical experience, you don't know whether or not you want to become an attorney, you can join us at the Law Center. We have a lot of public-facing events. One of them that we put on 3 times per month is a first come, first serve walk-in legal advice clinic called the Resilient Communities Legal Cafe. And we take volunteers, and if you want to just sit in on some of those client sessions, we can certainly find a way to potentially have you join that. We have our policy cafes where people interested in participating in policy making in their local communities can come. And we definitely have lots of volunteer opportunities working with the different projects that we're incubating, like the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, which is basically buying up property in the East San Francisco East Bay and taking it off the speculative market to become permanently affordable. And also the People Power Solar Cooperative, which is creating community-owned and controlled solar energy. So here are some resources for y'all. Yassi?
Yeah, and we'll send the slide deck to you, and we'll also send you actual direct links to resources after this webinar. But we want to highlight the blog that has some experiences of apprentices on there and some frequently asked questions. We have the Facebook group, which I really recommend that you join. That's the best way to get connected with people in your area who are doing this already. And yeah, I think we'll wrap it there. We're a little bit over time. So thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And like I said, we have lots of public events. So you can go to www.theselc.org/events, and you can find all of the events that we're putting on, and join us in person or online. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Yeah, that's it. Take care. Bye.
It's nice. Everyone was thinking.
So many questions.
Wait, we're still on.
Did it end for you?
I left the meeting.